A wonderful good afternoon to you from the KXAN Live studios. I'm Billy Gates, and this is, of course, Nick's first warning. And clearly, I'm not Nick, but this guy is. Nick Bannon, there he is. He's going to bring you some information about how El Nino affects spring weather in Central Texas. Obviously, when we think of El Nino, we think of how it affects winter. But in your latest blog on KXAN.com, you kind of go over how it affects the spring. So go ahead and take it away, good sir.
Yeah, so as we have very frequently talked about, El Nino has a strong correlation with wetter and cooler than normal winters for us here in Central Texas. And we've had a wetter than normal one easily, although we're certainly ending this winter warmer than normal. But what we're going to talk about today is what this could do for us in the spring. Now, this is a chart here of the odds of El Nino versus La Nina versus ENSO neutral, which is where you're not in El Nino or La Nina. Right now we're in El Nino, and the odds of El Nino in the February, March, April period, 100%. I've circled the odds of El Nino for March, April, May, MAR here, because that is what we consider meteorological spring, which begins March 1st, which is next Friday. So technically, from a meteorological perspective, March 1st begins our brand new season, and it runs through the end of May. And the odds, as you can see here, of El Nino continuing through meteorological spring are around 75%. The other alternative there being ENSO neutral, which means that there's no influence from the warm waters in the eastern equatorial Pacific. You can see the other bars, the gray bars, the chance of neutral, which starts to rise in the April through June period, so toward the tail end of spring and into the beginning of meteorological summer. And then the chances of La Nina start to really pick up June, July, August. So as we head later into summer, and especially once we're deep into summer and into fall, those odds of La Nina continue to go up. So what do we think of when we think of El Nino in the spring? Well, there was a study done a few years back about the incidence of severe weather during the spring in both La Nina springs and El Nino springs. And they looked at the occurrences of tornadoes, and they also looked at the number of hail events. And what you can see here are the number or what typically happens to the number of tornadoes during spring El Ninos. And what you can tell about most of the country really is the brown or orange color indicates fewer tornadoes during El Nino springs, which does include us here in Central Texas. But when we get to hail, there's an even bigger drop in the number of hail events here as we head into the spring months during an El Nino period, March, April, and May. And the general reasoning for this is that the surface winds that would be bringing in more Gulf moisture, more warmth, and more humidity are not as strong during El Nino springs, and therefore we don't see the big temperature differences as much between the warm southerly air and then the much colder air to the north of us. And without a big clash of air masses, this usually means lower incidence of both tornadoes and especially hail, Billy.
So yeah, just kind of simply put, warm air, cold air, running into each other, that's what creates the severe weather that we've always talk about, correct?
Yeah, in a very simple
at a basic
way,
level, right?
For sure, yeah. And in the spring El Ninos, we don't see as big of a difference between the air north of us and the air here, and without such a big difference, again, speaking in broad terms, we get less severe weather. Now, this doesn't mean no hail. This does not mean no tornadoes. And certainly there are incidents when in spring you get surprises, where in an El Nino spring you might get a lot of severe weather versus a La Nina spring, which is usually the opposite of this. You could have a quieter period. So it doesn't guarantee that we get less hail or fewer tornadoes, but it does point us in that direction, broadly speaking, from that March through May period.
Well, it's just always good to stay weather with good information. Obviously, this is information we want you all to know. So take this how you will.
Yeah, and it's honestly it's a good thing. We still need the rain, of course. This doesn't speak to that, but this says fewer tornadoes and especially fewer occurrences of hail. We all know how expensive hail can be here in Central Texas. We of course had that massive multi-million-dollar hailstorm. I think it was last September, which of course is not in the spring, but this would be a good thing for us in all ways, that we would have less severe weather potentially this spring.
And I finally learned to just have my garage cleared out so I could put my car in it instead of having to rush to throw out all the Amazon boxes from my wife's orders and things like that.
Yeah.
I've got it all cleared out, ready to go the next time you tell me to put my car in the garage.
Yeah, and certainly the potential for severe weather is going to happen this spring, even with this outlook. But hopefully we can see fewer occurrences of hail and tornadoes. I do want to jump ahead, though, and talk about spring as a whole, because we haven't done that yet here on our first warning Sundays.
We do love spring. We do love spring.
We do love spring, and technically it begins on Friday. So let's talk about the spring rainfall forecast. This is from the Climate Prediction Center, and they're going with near normal rainfall for us March through May, but they're leaning a little drier than normal west of Austin and into the hill country during that same period. The odds of it being drier are not particularly great, but they do lean that way from a rainfall perspective. Just broadening the view out, you can see the southeastern U.S. is where the wetter than normal weather should be during that period, and drier, Billy, in your neck of the woods in the Pacific Northwest.
Oh, yeah.
Let's talk about temperatures for spring. Again, March, April, and May. The odds looking near normal for us. Where's the warmer air? Well, that's in the west, the northwest, the northern tier, and in the northeast. So near normal for us during those spring months is the way things are looking for now.
Well, I mean, that's not bad. I mean, normal is normal, right?
Yeah. Normal means that, hopefully no surprises. Of course, this doesn't mean that we don't get outrageous heat or the potential for cold. Normal is sort of on the balance of things, looking over those 3 months near average from that perspective.
Right. And now, since you mentioned spring, obviously a big thing associated with spring is, of course, daylight savings time.
Yeah.
And while we were off air preparing for this little show we put on for you, you had mentioned that you had some information about daylight savings time, so let's hit that. Go for it.
Yeah, just so happens daylight saving time begins 2 weeks from today. That's March 10th, so this is when we'll be changing our clocks. On that Sunday, March 10th, the sun rises at 7:46 in the morning, which ties as being the latest sunrise of the whole year. So we get a really dark morning, but we also get much more light in the evenings when we spring forward. So the sun sets at 7:36. And just speaking about how the sunset progression works, tonight's sunset is at 6:27. And then by March 10th, that first day of daylight saving time, it's at 7:36. April 17th has our first 8 o'clock or later sunset of the year. And then June 22nd begins the 8:36 sunsets, which are the latest of the whole year. So we get into the beginning of summer there, and then we start getting those latest sunsets of the year, 8:36. We're still a ways from that now, but we're heading in the right direction for those that want more light in the evening.
I do enjoy a sunny 12-hour day. Like that's kind of where I'm at with my preference anyway.
Yeah, well, there you
like
go. And those will be here. Spring equinox is the beginning of that. And then as we get past the spring equinox, then our days longer than our nights. And then, of course, the beginning of summer marks the longest day of the year.
Good stuff, Nick. Thank you so much. And clearly, all of our forecast updates, everything that goes into this will be on KXAN.com. It'll be over the air. So stick with KXAN and the First Warning Weather Team for all the updates, all the forecasts as we go through the end of meteorological winter here and into spring, and then we'll see how good these Climate Prediction Center projections are, and then go from there.
Yeah, exactly. And as we mentioned last week, meteorological spring begins our severe weather season here in Central Texas. So certainly want you staying weather aware. And we've got a blog on this particular topic, looking into that tornado and hail potential on KXAN.com right now.
Yep, and we'll have plenty more to say about severe weather when it gets here, for sure.
Exactly.
All right, well, hey, that'll do it for this edition of Nick's First Warning. And for Nick Bannon, I'm Billy Gates. Thank you so much for watching, and we will talk to you again very soon.
See ya.